Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar. Next slide, please. So thank you for joining us for our webinar today in supporting recovery for people aging with serious mental health conditions webinar series. This is session 2, best practices in psychiatric rehabilitation for people aging with serious mental health conditions. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeastern Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC. We're housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Katy Rivera, and I'm the project coordinator of the center, and I'll be introducing our webinar speaker today. Next slide. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health workforce to deliver evidence-based and promising practices to individuals with mental health conditions. We also offer training programs on evidence-based practices for serious mental health conditions, wellness and recovery for providers and people with mental health conditions, school mental health, and comprehensive multi-tiered services and supports, Hispanic and Latinx mental health education, online education courses such as Wellness Matters, IMR, Functional Thinking, and more. And as a reminder, all of our training programs, products, and services are available to you at no cost. Next slide, please. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products that the Northeastern Caribbean MHTTC is providing, we ask that you please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up at the bit.ly link that you see on the screen, or the QR code that you see on the screen, you can scan it. Next slide, please. Following this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to them. So we thank you in advance for your participation. Next slide, please. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website along with any presentation slides or any relevant resources such as handouts, and it will be posted on our website within 7 days. Next slide. At the time of this presentation, Marian Delphin Rittman served as Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions expressed herein in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Next slide. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during this webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer them. The MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. Next slide, please. And as a reminder, we also we'd like to share a resource, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And this is for people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, mental health substance use crisis, emotional distress, or for people who are concerned about someone in crisis. Next slide, please. Now let's begin our webinar. We have Dr. Michelle Sechner with us today. Dr. Sechner is an assistant professor at Rutgers Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. She has been working in the areas of health, wellness, and self-care strategies for over 15 years. Her work has centered on helping people living with mental health conditions, their family members, and the staff who support them. Dr. Sechner has worked in a variety of settings, both community and inpatient mental health settings, nursing homes, and in-home services. In her current role, she works with a wide range of mental health professionals, providing consultation, building staff resilience, and flourishing. She also teaches students and conducts research on motivational health and wellness practices. So again, a warm welcome to everyone, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Sechner.
Thank you so much, Kati, and good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you here, and I appreciate all of you taking the time out to join me today to talk about this topic, which is really something that's quite important to me. I've been thinking about and working with older adults since about 1992 in a different variety of settings. And I really care a lot about working with older adults who have different kinds of issues. And I'm really excited that you're here. What I want to go over today is, this is part 2 of a series of 3. Last session, we'll do a little review. We talked a lot about psychiatric rehabilitation and how that might be applied to people who are aging with mental health conditions. Today, I want to talk about the best practices for people aging with mental health conditions, and also some of those specific examples of programs that are out there in the literature. And then I, throughout this, encourage you to think about your own setting, how you might be able to use some of the information that we talk about, and I'll be asking you some questions, and I encourage you to engage with me with chat, because I do read the chat and try to address the questions as they come up. So I'd like to start, if we can, by, if you like, I welcome you to drop your first name in the chat, your role, like, are you a case manager, are you a peer, or what do you do, and the state that you're joining us from. So that would be really lovely. And if you could just go ahead and drop your name. So I'm Michelle. My role is, I'm an assistant professor at Rutgers Department of Psych Rehab. And my state is New Jersey. So here I am in downtown, beautiful, gray, central New Jersey, which is kind of rainy and overcast today. Oh, wonderful. We've got people from Oklahoma, New York, Seattle. Oh, wonderful. Wow, you all are here so early. I really appreciate you being here. And some folks from last time, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, South Jersey, woo! Illinois. Not that every state isn't wonderful, because every state is wonderful, but just got to lift up the folks that are nearby. Ohio, wonderful. Oh, Puerto Rico, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. That's so great. Okay, well, we've got people from all over the country, which is lovely. And somebody from Newark, New Jersey. Awesome. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and welcome. Oh, Utah and Pennsylvania. Very nice. Okay, well, we do have a lot of folks here. That's exciting. I want to spend a few moments. I noticed that I recognize a few names that are familiar from last time, so I'm really grateful that you joined today. I'm going to do a quick review just so that we're all on the same page, and welcome those of you who are new. I'm so glad you joined today. So we talked last week about people with aging with mental health conditions have specialized needs. And some of those needs, I know that many of you work with people who are aging with mental health conditions, but we just need to sort of remember that these folks have long-term experiences of health and mental health conditions. They've had poverty often, they've lived in poverty, and it maybe experienced discrimination, which really impacts their access to healthcare and health outcomes. They also, as a population, are at increased risk of institutionalization in long-term care. They're almost 3 times more likely to be in nursing homes than people who have not experienced mental health conditions in their lives. They have higher rates of hospitalization and often increased costs for care. So they have a lot of unique issues. And I propose, and I think, and I've been doing a lot of research and publishing and thinking about and talking to people about the idea of psychiatric rehabilitation and promoting recovery, community integration, and quality of life for people aging with mental health conditions. I think there's a lot we can do. And I think psych rehab, which is my field, is a really great way to think about it, because it's really focused on getting people back in their lives. We do also know that aging beliefs shape outcomes. We talked a lot about that last time. So attitudes about aging matter. Our attitudes about aging and how we interact with our service recipients does matter, because it actually can kind of unconsciously influence how we provide care. That also, those attitudes about aging influence the people we serve, because they may feel like they can't get better. They may feel like there is no hope. Which will impact their health outcomes and their ability to move forward with their life and their quality of life. So I think that ageism is something that we have to continue to talk about and think about in mental health, and address it as it comes up. we also need to, excuse me, recognize that recovery is possible for everyone. Each person can grow and live a satisfying life despite their health conditions. And I really feel strongly about this. I worked in nursing homes. I worked in Alzheimer's and dementia units in nursing homes. And I was really struck that people who have Alzheimer's have a sense of quality of life and have a sense of flow and can live and grow in their lives. And I think that we all should be thinking about that for the people that we serve. So a quick reminder of recovery. Recovery doesn't mean that a person doesn't have that mental or cognitive issue. That's not what it means. It just means that the person is living a meaningful life while still living with symptoms or challenges. I love this quote by Bill Anthony. He's one of the founders of Psychiatric Rehabilitation. And he says that recovery is a way of living a satisfying, hopeful, and contributing life, even with the limitations caused by illness. I think that's really, really profound and important. So how we help people who are aging with mental health conditions recover, it's complicated, and it's not a linear process. It's not that one day the person has a mental illness and isn't doing well and the next they have recovered. It takes time, effort, engagement, and how quickly people bounce back from a crisis or a mental health issue really depends on the resources they have, the supports that they have, their genetics, believe it or not, like their how well they might respond to medications, or how severe their symptoms are. Also self-efficacy, their sense of like, can they do these things, and perseverance. So, and I would say probably also the experiences of trauma or discrimination that a person experiences as well. Those all influence recovery. And for older adults, it's a lifetime, right? It's a collection of ups and downs, and maybe a service system that's not always super supportive of choice or strengths or personhood. So this is where we come in, right? Where we really sort of say, no, you know what? I want to support personhood and the strengths of older adults. Because, I think about Erickson and, back in the day, I took some psychology classes, and you did too, probably, that there are these sort of lifespan issues that we face. And for older adults, it's often a time of reflection, looking back on one's life. What does that look like for someone who has experienced a lifetime of mental health conditions or symptoms? What might be different for them? What might be important for them? So these are all questions that I think we have to consider when we think about recovery. So I want to hear from you now. I've been talking a bit. I'd love to hear, what are some ways that your aging service recipients live a satisfying, hopeful, and contributing life? So in the chat, take a moment, think about the people you are working with who are aging. And what do they do? How are they in the world that sort of says to you, you know what, they're living a satisfying, hopeful, and contributing life. I see someone saying that we make sure we wrap services around them to make sure that they are not so alone or isolated. That's great. Connecting with family, friends, partners, absolutely. Making their own decisions. Working, absolutely. Work is an important part. And whether that's full-time, part-time, paid or unpaid, having a meaningful activity every day. And I think occupational therapists are amazing. Any of you out there, woot woot, because what we do and how we structure our day is really important, and particularly for folks who may be experiencing mental health conditions. Able to access resources, hiking, biking, and camping, absolutely. One of my most important life lessons, I was leading an illness management and recovery group in one of our state psychiatric hospitals, and it was on the geriatric inpatient geriatric sort of the first unit where people arrived at the hospital. And I was leading this IMR group, and I was like, okay, what are the goals? What do we want to do? And there was this gentleman, and he was getting a lot of medication. He was wearing a towel around his shirt because he was having sort of excessive salivation, having a lot of trouble talking. And so I was sort of like, well, so what is your goal? And he's like, I want to find a girlfriend. And I was like, what? Of course he wanted to find a girlfriend. So then we talked about like, how might you go about that? So I think, we don't know until we talk to people what's important to them. How do they want to live in their life? What do they want to do in their lives? How are they contributing to others in their life? And that's a really important piece too for people living with mental health conditions as they age. What do they offer others so that they're not just a receiver of service, they're also have other roles. And you all have indicated that as like, a sibling, an aunt, a friend, a partner, or a husband, wife, um, and so there are a lot of different ways we can look at that, and it's exciting to see that. So let's talk about healthy aging for a second. Healthy aging is really, in some ways, I was thinking about this as I was preparing for this today, and I was thinking, healthy aging is a lot like recovery, because I was thinking it's kind of a continuous process, right? Which is kind of what recovery is. It's like it doesn't stop once once you get over the crisis, your mental health crisis, you still have to pay attention to your mental health. Healthy aging, you don't stop thinking and optimizing your life, you just keep going. Um, and it's really relevant. I liked this quote by the Pan American Health Organization, which is a division of the World Health Organization. And they talk about healthy aging as this continuous process, right, of optimizing opportunities to maintain and improve physical and mental health, independence, quality of life throughout the life course. And I've, done some things with gerontological organizations. And the interesting thing about gerontology is they're starting to think about aging not as it starts at age 65 and over. Literally, aging is a lifelong process, right? So the pictures here show sort of a life course of a person, and we're aging from the moment that we're born. So that's an important sort of thing to consider. So let's talk about normal aging for a second. The normal experience of getting older, it's to experience some changes in our bodies. And I think all of us, all of us humans here on this webinar can relate to that things change, as we get older each decade, our bodies change, our brains change. It may take, our reaction time may slow down a little bit, but how quickly we experience those aging changes is related to genetics, lifestyle issues, environment, and these social determinants of health. Again, talking about what helps and supports recovery or challenges recovery, the same is true for healthy aging. Things like poverty, trauma, discrimination, and access to care, all of that influences healthy aging. So the idea is really that in order to be in the process of healthy aging, we focus on our health. We take daily actions for physical and mental health that maintain what we currently have. We also look for new ways and focuses to improve our physical and mental health. And we explore different ways to improve our quality of life. And that is what makes a person's life worth living to them. Little things can make, I have a friend who works from home, and they were really starting to get bummed out about, not being somewhere different. So they started buying themselves flowers once a week so that there would be a little bit of bright spot in their environment. So, any little thing that you can do. And then finding those resources and supports that keep us independent and strong, and using them when we need them. So it's really important to remember that aging is not a disease. Aging is a natural process. We're all going through it. What is true is as we age, we're more likely to experience chronic conditions or diseases and a lot of transitions, which can put us at risk for depression. But I love this quote. Ashton Applewhite, I mentioned her last time, has a great book and some blogs and a TED talk. But one of her quotes is, "Aging is not a problem to be fixed or a disease to be cured. It's a natural, powerful, lifelong process that unites us all." That's pretty powerful, I think, in terms of healthy aging. So what does healthy aging mean for you? So turn to the chat and think about what are the things that healthy aging means for you. I could drop that in the chat of what does healthy aging mean to you. So when I think about healthy aging, I think about, I come from good stock. I had two grandmothers. I now I have one. I have one grandmother who's 98. And she says, "Do you think I'm going to be, going to be 100, Michelle?" And I said, "I don't know, Grandma. What do you think?" And but she's always been a very active person. And so for me, healthy aging is staying engaged and continuing to move and sort of not giving into the idea of I'm too old to do this. My grandma never sees herself as too old to do anything. I mean, she recognizes that aging is challenging and her body is changing, but she's definitely has a lot of zest for life, even at her age. And then someone says not having multiple health issues. And, I'm really glad that you said that, because when we talk about healthy aging, sort of initially there was a guy, some researchers, Rowe and Kahn, and they were talking about healthy aging and positive aging. And they sort of defined it as the absence of disease. And I think that's a great place to start. And the reality is that often disease and health conditions are a part of kind of a natural part of aging, and particularly for our population, it may be the case. So then it becomes, how do we live a good life despite some of those challenges? I see people sort of saying active and productive, being able to live alone. Yeah, independence, good health, and active lifestyle, being as independent as possible, having that integration of mind, body, and spirit, and feeling happy and satisfied with a life well lived, and really planning a healthy retirement. That's really that's a really great perspective as well, to sort of think about it as a natural experiences. That's a big transition for many people when they get retired. So aging positively is another way to think about this. I mentioned Rowe and Kahn. They were talking about successful aging. But I think that we can think about aging positively, even with health conditions, that we need to sort of help our clients imagine that they can live a healthy life with challenges. I mean, that's sort of that's about rehabilitation. And that's what we want to encourage people to do. One thing we can really do is encourage people to identify and use resources, whatever those are in their communities. For example, medical transportation, it might be something, a resource that would be helpful. Or it could be finding a local stretch class at a local senior center, or a computer class at a library. So identifying those resources that are available to the person in their community that might help them live as independently as possible. Also having flexibility. And when I talked about flexibility, I had to include this, image of someone trying to touch their toes, which is something I try to do periodically to keep flexible. But we also have to imagine psychological flexibility, being able to move with changes and tolerate changes in plans or abilities, which is it's a skill for sure. And I think that that's something that we can help people work on, to accept limitations, and instead of sort of getting stuck with that limitation, to sort of like, okay, and what resources, adaptations can we make to get around some of these challenges? Also engaging people in decisions, and I'm going to talk about shared decision making in a minute, but making sure that people feel sense of ownership in their own life, and being resilient. We'll talk more about that next week in the final session. But being able to see strengths and abilities even while experiencing these challenges, and being able to cope with whatever life sort of throws at us. And it's really that sort of a notion of, how can we help people have a positive aging experience by adapting and using what's available? And one way to do that, and I have this great image of a gentleman sitting in a wheelchair doing some stretching exercises while he's in the wheelchair. If you have bad knees or hips, sometimes you need to use a cane, sometimes you need to sit in a wheelchair, and yet he still looks like he's enjoying himself. He's still sort of exercising with someone. So how can we help people do the things that they want to do, that they need to do, despite whatever's going on with them? And I see a comment that someone says that when someone has a health condition, you have to help them figure out how to age with those conditions. That's a great point. It's how do we help people live with that? And I think one way we do that is we cultivate hope. It's really critical in aging process in life, I think, is hope. Hope is really vital in our lives. It's that development of upward spiral of positive emotion that helps people build sort of an enduring psychosocial resource and move forward. One of those is adopting positive attitudes about aging. You know, one thing that my my grandma often says to me is, this getting old's for the birds. And I'm like, I'm not sure why birds, get picked on in that way, but yeah, aging is not always fun. And yet it's so natural. There are a lot of gifts that can come with perspective, and we can help people think about what it means to be getting older. Maybe you're, growing in your wisdom and your perspective. That's really, really important to talk to our clients about. Also focusing on as much independence as possible and autonomy with adaptations and supports as needed, so that people can live in their own homes with supports. They can get a job, or they can find a significant other. They can do what they want, and they may need to go about it slightly differently. But that's important in terms of quality of life. And also tackling that self-stigma, as we talked about a little bit last time. And when people really sort of own that, aging is a horrible thing, I hate getting older. Why can't I do the things I used to be able to do? And then they're really critical and hard on themselves. That means that they might not try new things. They may they may miss out on a lot of things that they are interested in. Because they're limiting themselves, and they're saying, you know what, I'm too old to do X, Y, and Z. And I think we need to really challenge that message that no one is too old to make new friends. No one is too old to enjoy their lives. No one is too old to do what they want to do with themselves. So I think it's a challenge for the mental health system. It's a challenge for us as providers. It's a challenge that we can offer our service recipients as well, sort of tackle some of those self-stigmatizing ideas. And, by finding examples of people who are really successful in aging. I remember when I was in graduate school, there was a book, and of course I can't remember the name of the book. I don't remember those things, but what I do remember is there were these two sisters who were over 100. And they would do yoga every day, and they wrote a book, and I was in a gerontology program at that time, and I was like, oh wow, I could do yoga when I'm 100. And I'm like, that is like so inspiring to imagine that we can do what we want to do. Yeah, wow. And someone just offered in the chat that a gentleman said he was too old to learn the computer at 49. And those self-defeatist beliefs are really, really challenging. And CBT is actually something that's very helpful with older adults. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So we have to sort of think about, how do we inspire people? So how do you inspire hope in the people that you support? You just drop in the chat, what are some things that you do to help people feel more hopeful? And it can take different strategies. I think peer supports are amazing. When you see someone who is like you, who has done some things that you would like to be doing, it's very, very hopeful. Yes, absolutely. If we're too old, it's in our mindset. It's like thinking, you know what, maybe maybe age is a number in our head. And maybe thinking that we should be exactly the way we were when we were 25 is unrealistic. Maybe we do things now that we wouldn't have done. And that's, and maybe if you're 25, you do things differently than when you were in 15. So think about what you knew and how you could function 10 or 20 years ago, you probably have new skills, you probably have new perspectives. Um, and helping people rethink about what makes them happy. I think that's a wonderful way to to promote hope. I was thinking about this yesterday, because I'm very interested in positive psychology and aging, and was thinking, when I was 15, going on a roller coaster was my definition of happiness. And at my age now, which I will not share, but to say that I'm beyond 15, going on a roller coaster is not my definition of happy any longer, I can tell you. So definitely thinking about what brings you happiness can be really hopeful as well. And being able to sort of have that sense of you can do these things. It may take a little more time. We may have to think about how we do them differently, but don't give up on your dreams. Yes, and now people are saying that they have a little perspective on the things that they did when they were 25 wouldn't work for them right now, and that it does have some impacts on their health. So some strategies from positive psychology, and these are these are just some ideas to get you going, would be to encourage people to use motivational materials, whether that's music is so motivational, like the Rocky theme song. If somebody's feeling really, stressed out or defeated, like just think about that song. Or motivational posters or quotes or anything that really inspires the person. It could be their faith, actually. So having people connect or talk to people about their spirituality or their faith beliefs or their sense of meaning and purpose, that really is inspiring of hope. Gratitude, that has a lot of evidence to inspire hope as well, as gratitude reflections, like thinking, there's a technique, I may have talked about this last time, called 3 Good Things, that has a lot of evidence behind it. The folks at Greater Good Science Center talk about it a lot. And that's where you literally list 3 good things that happen in your day. And that sort of immediately boosts the mood. It helps people feel more hopeful for tomorrow, particularly if you share 3 good things that you initiated in the day. So it was like 3 good things, like I'm feeling pretty grateful that I was able to pull together some information to provide to you today, or I'm, particularly grateful that the brownies I baked turned out well, or just thinking about how you were involved or how the client was involved in the thing that they're grateful for. Working on forgiveness, that is a big lift, but it's very important to letting go and feeling happier and feeling more hopeful. Spending time reflecting on positive feelings and positive events, even when they're these little things. And sometimes these positive things can be, it's raining where I am, and I might feel really positive that it's not snowing, that, or that if the sun comes out later today, I'm probably going to feel really good about seeing the sun. And then really leaning into the person's strengths and reminding them of those strengths that they have, and the resilience and the perseverance and the post-traumatic growth that they may have experienced over that. Oh, interesting. Yeah, strengths-based therapy. That's wonderful. And then someone sort of was talking about that when God isn't done with you yet, like connecting people to their higher power in some way. And it's, of course, we have to sort of ask the person how they think about that, what's important to them. And, we don't define it for them, but it's really an important question to ask, particularly as people get older, to lean into spiritual and faith and beliefs and help people connect with community resources, because that often comes up as we near the end of life, or as we face particularly difficult losses as we get older. And someone else says they also they reflect on gratitude, so that's great. So those are some ideas for hope. We also have to know that there are these huge connections between our emotional, physical, and cognitive selves. We need these strategies because our emotional well-being is connected to our physical health. All you have to think about is the last time that you had the flu or COVID or any major illness, and you think about your emotional well-being in those moments, absolutely that our physical and emotional health is connected. And for people as they age, for our clients, There's just so much evidence that things, like breathing problems, COPD and emphysema are really connected to anxiety. Getting a new health diagnosis is really distressing and can cause anxiety and depression. And then cognitive health, I've been doing more and more work in the aging world. And that cognitive health is really the processes in our brain. It's about our thinking, like our focus, concentration, short-term memory, and making decision. So all of those things are often very impacting in people who've had mental health conditions for a long time and taken, medications for a long time. So they may have these overlapping issues in emotional, physical, and cognitive challenges. So we have to think about programs that address all of these areas when we work with mental health folks who have mental health conditions. So one way that we can help support people is to use a technique called shared decision making. And that's really kind of helpful when people have to make health decisions or when they have to make difficult decisions about their services. And it is considered a best practice in healthcare because it gives people more information, more time to process a difficult decision. And it does empower people who are seeking treatment in recovery because they're also sort of working with their provider to sort of make a decision. So let's start with what is shared decision making. When clients and supporters, and I said supporters because I was thinking, it could be a peer, it could be a mental health provider, it could be, anyone who's sort of in official capacity. It could even be a friend or a supporter in any way, or a healthcare provider. Make a decision together, right? But there's that power differential, right? Usually in healthcare between the client and the healthcare provider. But shared decision making really focuses on what are the options based on the evidence of effectiveness, and it balances any risks or outcomes with the person's preferences and values. So it sort of puts it all together. So let's talk about some of these shared decision-making tools. So one of the most famous in mental health is the Common Ground software by Pat Deegan, and Pat Deegan is amazing. She's a peer who calls herself a survivor of schizophrenia, who went on to get a PhD in psychology and is pretty prolific and amazing writer. And does a lot of work and advocacy for recovery and sort of pushing back against the medical model. She developed this product called the Common Ground software, which is a shared decision-making tool that helps people sort of prepare for when they go in to see their mental health provider and talk about medications, talk about concerns, risks, and benefits. And it really brings the voice of the person to the center of services. And it sort of refocuses the discussion from what matters to you. So it goes to what matters to you as a person, as opposed to what's the matter with you. That software is proprietary. You can look it up and get it. I know some agencies have it installed in computers in their waiting room. Also, there's some handouts and worksheets. I'm going to share one example with you in a second. I was excited to see, I've been thinking about shared decision making for about 15 years and reading the literature and thinking about how can we apply it in mental health. And I'm excited to say and see that SAMHSA now has a great series of handouts that may be useful for you, or videos. One is called The Role of Antipsychotic Medications in My Recovery Plan. So that's really a useful one for many people. There's also one about treatment for opioid use disorders. So those are really in the realm of mental health and behavioral health. The third one that I really like and I really am a fan of is the Ottawa Decision Making Guide that's come out of our friends from the North in Canada. And I'm giving you just a little picture of what that looks like. This can be done online. It's also downloadable as a handout, and it's perfectly free and available to anyone. I think if you want to use it for individual purposes, there's no license or anything. It does help people make health related or social decisions. So it doesn't really matter what the decision is. I've used the guide with different groups, and I feel like it's a very good template to help us guide these difficult decisions that we have. It helps people who are thinking through tough decisions step by step by getting clear on the why, like what is the problem? Why do they need to make that decision? And the timeline. It also lets people explore their choices and rank them sort of one to three, and then write down any pros and cons of each different option. It also has a section on support, which is important, I think, with our population, thinking about what a person might need to make a decision or take action, but also is someone influencing them to make a certain decision, and why is that person trying to influence them? So it really kind of walks through a lot of steps. It has a section on what the person needs to make a decision, like what's the next step, and then their plan. So this kind of gives you a picture of what it looks like. This is the very top part of it, the clarify the decision. How far along are you with the decision? And then explore those decisions, the knowledge, the values, and the certainty. So I encourage you to check it out if you haven't used a decision-making tool. They're really interesting. And I think it really would benefit a lot of folks and maybe empower people to be more engaged in the decisions that they have to make. So let me ask you, you may already be using shared decision-making tools. I see someone has put in that they use advanced directives, which is great. Anyone else tried any shared decision-making tools or have other strategies they use to engage people in making decisions? If you want to drop that in the chat. Someone else has said, thinking about harm reduction. Absolutely, harm reduction is a really, really helpful strategy because you don't get into that power struggle so much with someone when you're like, smoking is bad or using substances is bad. They probably know that. And if they're willing to talk about reducing harm, that's a really great first discussion, because it's the relationship often with the person where they're more willing to listen to you, right? If they have a relationship. Someone says a lot of motivational interviewing. Absolutely. Asking those open-ended questions, affirming, reflecting, and summarizing the ors, and then having those conversations of exploring why someone wants to try something new, exploring the pros and the cons of those decisions. So definitely motivational interviewing can be helpful. So let's talk about some of the other evidence-based programs and strategies for older adults with mental health conditions. I wanted to focus on the evidence-based programs, and that means things that have been studied that have good outcomes. Some of those studies have been adapted from some of the interventions have been adapted from other programs, while some of them are unique for people who are aging. And there's a great report, it's listed in the resource section of this, that is from SAMHSA. It's on psychosocial interventions for older adults with mental health conditions. It's very, very well put together. I highly recommend it. So how do EBPs help evidence-based practices? Often for older adults living with mental health conditions, they're targeting functioning at home, in relationships, and in the community, and functioning, or that's just really being able to do what you want to do, where you live, managing your money, bathing, dressing, navigating relationships with housemates or roommates or with your doctor, getting help when you need it, or transportation. Those are all examples of functioning that a person might need who is aging. Also being more engaged with services. So we want people to have the supports they need, and sometimes it's a little bit challenging, and that engagement can be very helpful. there are also programs that have looked at reducing psychiatric symptoms. Of course, I would add to this is, coming from SAMHSA, how EBPs help. I would add, we need to make sure that we're looking at quality of life and well-being. I think those are really important outcomes that don't get talked about enough in the research. So let's talk about some of the psychiatric rehabilitation or psychosocial programs that are available and categorized by SAMHSA. And these are the types of programs that are offered to people aging with mental health conditions: skills training, self-management, integrated care, peer support, and caregiving support. So we're going to go over the definitions of those and some examples of the programs. Yeah, and someone else has dropped in the chat that they really want to listen. And I think listening is definitely a best practice in mental health, when we really listen and try to understand what the person is saying, because that does help build a relationship, and it also helps us contribute more meaningfully when we want to support someone make a difficult decision. And there are a lot of difficult decisions that people have to make. Things like, should I get chemotherapy for my diagnosis of cancer? Should I move to this new kind of housing that may have more services? Do I want to stay on this medication when it has increasing side effects for me? So there are a lot of decisions that people have to make that they're not always fully engaged in, and we want to encourage that ownership as much as possible. So let's talk about skills training for a second. The first type of program is probably pretty familiar to most of us. It's skills training, learning new behaviors, supporting independent living, those relationships that we mentioned before of social relationships, relationship with provider, relationships with the community or neighborhood. Some examples of skills training would be communication, problem solving, talking to a doctor, using a bus. What are some of the skills that you think that your clients need to be focused on? So just drop those in the chat. What are some of the skills that the people that you are working with who are aging need? Communication. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the best books ever has helped me, I teach, it helps all my students, is Social Skills Training for Schizophrenia by Belak et al. It's an amazing book, and it has every example of communication, and they actually have a subsection for older adults as well. So it's like, how do you talk to your medical provider? How do you say no? How do you ask for something that you want? Has tons of examples of how to do that, which is really, really helpful, particularly for people newer to running groups. And even when you're not, it's helpful to have something already put out there. Learning new balance and housekeeping, communication, problem solving, hygiene. Yeah, calm conversation. The name of the book, and I have it here, hold it up in front of my face so you can see it. It's called Social Skills Training for Schizophrenia. And it's a pretty old book by Alan Belak and Kim Musser, Susan Gingrich, and Julie Agresta. It's really highly recommended. And they do, as I mentioned, have a small section on adapting some of the skills training for older adults, suggesting that it may take a little more time. We may need to go a little slower. We may need to break those skills down more slowly. Understanding medications, absolutely. When we talk about health literacy is a skill as well. So people really understanding their medications, when to take them, understanding a new diagnosis, understanding what the implication for that. I mean, just something simple like, I don't know, for any of you skin folks, I had a BCC last year, which is a type of cancer, but it's not a big deal. It turns out that they just cut it out, and then it's like you're done. And I didn't know that. And I'm like wondering, like, well, would everyone know that? So when you get a new diagnosis, what does that mean? And redefining values. Yes, I will put that name of the book, Social Skills. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to multitask uh, as I get older, but I do my best. And there are multiple versions. It should be really cheap. The social skills training book should be really cheap because it's been around forever. So you could probably find a used copy as well. Not, I mean, I want to support the authors, but cognitive restructuring. Oh, awesome. That's great. That actually has a lot of evidence as well for older adults. And psychoeducation. Um, yeah, and definitely sort of refreshing and reminding people that we value them, and friendship skills, right? Like, and that's a skill sometimes that needs to be reminded of, like how people can give and take, right? So we want to make sure that we give older adults an opportunity to offer their support and offer their wisdom to us, so that it's a more even friendship as well. And even those communication styles, I don't know if anyone has ever worked with someone who is experiencing anxiety, or maybe, more kind of in a more manic state or hypomanic state. There has to be sometimes the training, the discussion about, letting sort of equal time for people to have a conversation. Conversation means that you get to say something and then there's a pause, and I get to say something and then there's a pause and then you get to say something. And that's a very concrete example of a social skill training, is sort of how to have a conversation. These are really, really, really helpful skills. And there's a lot of evidence that that's one of the most important areas, and most researched areas of services for older adults with mental health conditions. Another area that we're probably all pretty familiar with is self-management, and that's taking responsibility for our behavior and well-being. And it's an area that people who've been in the mental health system a long time, the public mental health system, may have difficulty with. They may have sort of said, you know what, my providers are telling me what to do all the time. They're telling me I need to do this, I need to go there, I need to go to the doctor. I don't really have to think about what I need to do for myself anymore, because people tell me what to do all the time. And that sort of institutional thinking or stinking thinking needs to be challenged. And we need to encourage people to take responsibility as much as they can for the decisions and what goes on in their lives, because that really is part of living life. It was when we're really engaged in the decisions and what's going on around in our lives. Also, addressing physical health is really important for everyone, but particularly when you've lived a lifetime with a serious mental health condition. So managing our health becomes part of that picture. For example, somebody might have diabetes. They may need more information or support or behavioral tailoring to think about how to manage their diabetes and their blood sugar levels through what they choose to eat, monitoring their blood sugar levels, and what actions to take when things get sort of out of control. The last area of self-management is probably the one that we're most familiar with, which is regulating our emotions. Making sure that a person has the skills, right? But also can apply them. Coping as well is really important, coping skills to navigate anger or sadness so that it doesn't get overwhelming. It doesn't sort of spill out into their relationships and their ability to function in the environment that they choose. There's a lot of evidence that cognitive behavioral therapy, including cognitive restructuring, cognitive remediation, is effective in helping older adults regulate their emotions. So that's also a very well studied psychotherapeutic process that's helpful for older adults with mental health conditions. Integrated care is an area that is gaining more and more interest and evidence that this is very, very important to include. It includes integrating mental and physical care. Often services are co-located, meaning they're in the same building. They may or should have shared treatment plans, even if they're not in the same location. The physical and the mental health care service can see the treatment plan of the other one so that there's better continuity of care. And there's, NAMI is wonderful, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they have some great materials on integrated care, and they suggest that it really reduces stigma. If you think about it, as someone who's an older adult is going to go to the clinic that happens to have their primary care provider, and it has a mental health counselor or case manager in the same location, which is a lot less stigmatizing than, drop me off at, Center State Mental Health Center, right? So that we really see that co-location as reducing stigma. And we'll talk about a model for integrated care in a moment. Peer supports. Peers are so powerful. I wonder if we have any peers in this webinar today. Hey, glad you're here. You offer some amazing services. Being able to connect with someone who's walked in your shoes is really, really important. And it helps recovery so much. Oh, yay, we do have a peer supporter. Awesome, at least one. The skills needed to offer peer support to older adults includes communication, addressing social support needs, use of decision support aids, and advocacy. It's really, really important. I'm doing some work, and I put the link in the resources with the Academy of Peer Services that is funded through the Office of Mental Health in New York State, but it's a website that's free to anyone to use. And there's a wonderful new certificate coming out about older adults and peer services. So it's really, really gaining traction, I think, peer services. It also offers a lot of hope. When you see someone with that shared experience as you, and they're doing well, and they've navigated some difficult situations just as you have, it makes a huge difference in the quality of life. So definitely something to consider is peer supports. And I don't think that we're far enough along. I always advocate with, people. I teach a class on aging and psych rehab, and I tell my students, we need to do more with peer supports and thinking in research in general with people aging with mental health conditions, because there's just not enough out there. Oh, thank you. As someone else has said, peer support enhances networking for sure and decreases stress. Very good. And there's a lot of evidence for peer support for younger ages, less so in older adults. The research isn't there. I think it's definitely very, very important. So if you have a peer supporter on your team, that's amazing. If you don't, I think you should definitely look into it as a resource, because they're very powerful, very powerful. The other area that older adults may need to think about, or we may need to support them in, is caregiving support. Being aware of those caregivers. Caregivers need education about resources, diagnoses, and strategies to communicate, how to navigate crises, and just to try to overall prevent any burnout that they may be experiencing. They often need linkages and referrals to community agencies that offer things like respite service, or support groups, self-help kind of groups for caregivers. And what's really important is to remember that your service recipient may be a caregiver. And again, it can be sort of our own sense of like, really, could they? But yes, actually, you would be very surprised. In fact, I wonder if you already are serving older adults who have mental health conditions who are caregivers. So having that awareness that our clients may need some supports around being a caregiver as well for someone older than themselves or for their colleagues. Yes, I see someone has said, yes, you noticed that. One organization, I think it's University of Pennsylvania, Mark Salzer and his group I believe they have they have some information about parents who have mental health conditions, and I believe they have a sort of a handout on caregivers who have mental health conditions as well. Yeah, if someone notes that when the person is a caregiver and the person they're caring for dies, they often feel like they no longer have a purpose. And that's really, really an important observation that you're making, that we need to make sure that people get the support they need. They may need grief support after their recipient passes away. They may need some supports to prevent any kind of crisis. Thank you for bringing that up. I want to give you some examples of some programs that are evidence-based for people with mental health conditions. And these all have research and evidence behind them. So cognitive behavioral social skills training, CBSST. I've included the link to that in the resource page. There is a manual that you can follow, and I think those folks are from the VA in California, at University of Southern California, and I apologize if I misremembered that. But CBSST combines cognitive behavioral therapy, because remember I said CBT has a lot of research and evidence that it's effective for older people who have schizophrenia or major depression, bipolar disorder. So it combines CBT with social skills training, which we were just talking about a little bit with the social skills training for schizophrenia book. It has a cognitive skills module that teaches people to challenge their thoughts by the 3 C's: catch, check, and change. It's got a social skills module with behavioral role plays, got problem solving skills. That's hard to say. Problem solving skills module. Kind of things like how to assess possible solutions, which is the best one, lay out a plan and evaluate the plan. It's designed for people living in the community with mental health conditions. And it was developed, as I mentioned, at a VA. So it's got a lot of research behind it. And the evaluation of it has strong support for this program. The evidence is very strong that this helps outcomes. It improves people's independent functioning and learning the skills taught in the group. There's another program called the FAST, and I'm not going to even try to say the Spanish version, Cati, I'm trying to be appropriate here. I can't say that, but the Spanish version is PEDAL. That's the acronym, FAST and PEDAL. And that's adaptation skills to help people who were living in RHCFs, residential healthcare facilities, and board and care homes. And they're all called differently in different parts of the country, but basically services where a person lives in the place. They get 3 meals a day. They may get a little bit of social service. They may get a little bit of med management, but that's about it. They don't get any programming usually, or minimal. So this program was tailored to folks living in those kinds of settings, and was really effective for people with schizophrenia or experiencing psychosis. It improved their psychiatric symptoms, their social and communication skills, use of emergency services like calling 911, which is sometimes listed as a challenge, that people may overuse 911, and medication management. So that's also been well studied and found to be effective. There's also the HOPES program, helping older people experience success to improve independent functioning of older adults with mental health conditions living in the community, to help them stay in the community by teaching them social, community living, and healthy living skills. That was developed by Dr. Stephen Bartels and the folks at Dartmouth. And that's really targeted to people in outpatient settings. I think they also tried it in senior centers, people 50 and over living with a variety of mental health challenges. That program has been found to have moderate evidence in the research to help people with independent living skills, quality of life, communication skills, even their psychiatric symptoms, and their health self-management. So managing those health conditions, as we talked about. and how to use leisure time in a more productive way. So again, going back to that idea of occupational wellness, where we structure our day in a certain way. So what do you do on a Saturday or a Sunday? What is our client, or a day that you're not working? And then the same would be true for our clients. What do they do on a given day to give their life meaning and purpose? Making sure that, meaning and purpose is important. And if someone's, oversleeping or spending a lot of time in bed, that may not give them that sense of meaning and purpose. There's also integrated IMR. Has anyone heard of illness management and recovery? So this is integrated illness management and recovery. This is a self-management program, and IMR has a lot of research that it's effective. And the IMR basically follows a similar, oh, great, someone taught a small IMR group. That's great. And other people teach it. Wonderful. So the integrated IMR it has two parallel manuals. It has the illness management and recovery manual, which is available on SAMHSA's evidence-based practice kit. So if you just Google IMR, if you're interested, it goes over, it's an illness management program that focuses on recovery and helping people set and achieve personally meaningful goals. The integrated IMR combines that with wellness, what they call wellness management, meaning focused on physical health strategies. So the first module would be on thinking about your physical wellness and what are your goals around your physical wellness. Typically, the wellness manual is taught by a nurse, and the traditional IMR is taught by a mental health practitioner. It's designed to help older adults with mental health conditions who also have chronic physical health conditions. It uses CBT strategies, education, and goal setting to help people manage their psychiatric symptoms and their physical health. The evidence suggests that there's moderate evidence that the program can help. And I did include a link. I found a version online. I wanted to give you guys as much resources as I can, because I know there aren't a lot of resources for older adults with mental health conditions. So I want to give you as much as I can. I included a link to a version of IMR in the resource page so that you could see what it looked like. Yeah. So also, integrated care is considered an evidence-based practice, as we talked about. I think that Assertive Community Treatment Act, as it's called, or PACT, as it's called in New Jersey, I believe it falls into that integrated care because it's a multidisciplinary team. They often used to call it as a hospital without walls. And that team could include a nurse, it might include a psychiatrist, might include a peer, a vocational specialist, a counselor, can make up of a lot of different people. And the idea is to really keep people out of the hospital. And it's been studied and used in people in 50 and over. In particular, again, in the VAs have used this model and studied it and found it to be effective with moderate evidence to help people connect with services and stay in services, and improving medication, people taking medication. So that has a lot of evidence-based. There's also something called psychiatric collaborative care, which was a model that was really developed initially focused on primary care services to include behavioral health in that, but there have been some like small pilots that have targeted this for older adults with mental health conditions. And it's different in that it's person-centered, which is, a care team that really looks at the entire person, but also population-based, meaning that it may be, everyone on a certain list from somewhere is included in that service, which is a little bit different than some of the other types of services. The treatment is typically goal-based and tries to include the person's wishes, and there's active outreach, similar to assertive community treatment. everyone who's on a certain list is sort of enrolled, and then there's active outreach by the provider to try to engage people in care. There are also billing codes that are made available to charge Medicare and Medicaid and private insurers. So there's a big focus on outcomes in this type of care that really look at keeping people out of the hospital, keeping people in their own homes, etc. So this is a newer model that there's some interesting information and videos from the American Psychiatric Association about it, some information from SAMHSA about it as well. So it's sort of a new kind of bigger model, systemic model of how to engage people in physical healthcare people who have mental health issues. We talked about peer providers. Yay, we have peer providers here. Some of the things that I'm familiar with, and I welcome you to think and tell me about the things that you're aware of. You may know more than I do. There is a Wellness Recovery Action Plan that was developed by Mary Ellen Copeland. It's been around for many years, which offers advanced directives for people who are living with mental health conditions, like triggers, early warning signs. What would you like to do, sort of like a plan that has now been adapted for older adults, which is very exciting. I haven't seen it yet, but some people were telling me about it. Some peers were telling me about it. So that's available in a small booklet or a super small purse-sized booklet for older adults. There's also the HARP program, Health and Recovery Peer Program. And I put an asterisk there because it does have evidence that it improves health outcomes. HARP is a 6-session disease self-management program, and it typically has improved recovery, physical and mental health related quality of life. It's not been studied specifically with older adults, but I included it because I feel like it would also be beneficial for older adults because it's a chronic disease self-management program. There's also been some pilots of peer wellness coaching. I was involved in peer wellness coaching development with Dr. Peggy Swarbrick, and that model was adapted in Pennsylvania. I know we have someone here from Pennsylvania who may even be familiar with the pilot, and I included a resource to some folks in Pennsylvania who may know more about it, that included a specialty peers who were trained in wellness coaching strategies who targeted older adults. I don't know that the program is still running, but that model does exist. Additionally, there is now certification, and I'm on the East Coast, so I know the East Coast best. Certifications for peer specialists in Pennsylvania has one. And as I mentioned, New York, I've been involved with a group of peers and specialists in New York State. And we've developed a five-session class on older adults and peer specialists, what they need to know, things like healthy aging, foundations in aging, attitudes about aging, and the aging experience. So that's been a lot of fun for me to work on. And anything else that you know about that you want to drop in the chat, I would love to hear about it, because this is such a specialty area, older adults with mental health conditions. There's not a lot of research. There's not a lot of resources. So I love to hear anything else that you may be involved in, know about it. That could be helpful. So those are some peer programs that have some evidence-based basis for improving outcomes for people who are aging with mental health conditions. Okay, caregiving supports. It's very interesting. This is another place where I feel like I got one foot in the aging world, one foot in the mental health world, because caregiving really depends on who is providing the caregiving and what type of caregiving they're providing. So basically, these are programs that improve knowledge, skills, and distress for people who support others. These are services that may be offered to family members or friends, or it may be the people living with mental health conditions themselves, if they're caregivers. There are so many different programs. I couldn't really find one definitive best practice. So I'm a researcher. I want to give you the best information. I'm not aware of any one, and I did do some preliminary research. I couldn't find any one best practice. But what I would suggest is if the person is a caregiver of an older adult, that the area agency on aging in the person's community may be helpful in terms of caregiver support. Caregiver groups, may be hotlines, maybe respite, maybe providing caregiving services that can come in home a couple times a week to help the person. Also, senior centers may have senior ideas for caregivers as well. The National Alliance on Caregiving did a really, really great report called Walking on Pins and Needles about caregiving for people living with mental health conditions. There was a little bit about it on older adults. And then NAMI also is a wonderful resource. So, NAMI has and I'm a trained family to family provider, and that is a program for caregivers. It's 3 months, 16 sessions, and that has some evidence base as well to support caregivers of people who have whatever type of need. So, and someone is saying in the chat, they're combining behavioral health services in supported housing. Not really a name yet, just a newly emerging process. Interesting. And I think housing providers, multiple housing providers have reached out to me. I've talked to them. They experience a lot of challenges, and they may be more familiar with some of the behavioral health issues, but they may not always know that, or they may not know about aging, and then that issue of aging in place. So as someone may be aging and have mental health conditions, and the housing provider may not be aware of what resources are available, and it gets really complicated because if someone receives certain kinds of housing supports or services, they may not be eligible for aging services that keep people out of nursing homes. It's really complicated and kind of a mess. I've talked to some of the folks at the Division of Mental Health Services in New Jersey, and we've talked a lot about these systemic challenges, and the care is so siloed between mental health and aging and substances. I mean, even behavioral health, we're not always on the same page. So I think these kind of discussions need to continue, and we need to get better at understanding how we can support people aging with mental health conditions. I did want to include a few evidence-based aging programs because I think these are things that may offer some ideas for us in mental health. There's a program called PEARLS, which is Program to Encourage Active, Rewarding Lives, PEARLS. It educates older adults about what depression is and helps them develop skills for self-sufficiency and more active lives. It's 6 to 8 sessions, and it usually happens in the person's home or in the community. And they have had a lot of research done on that model that it does improve quality of life and depressive symptoms. Has it been tested with people living with mental health conditions? Not to my knowledge. However, because there are so few programs that are available that have a lot of evidence and research, I think that it's worth mentioning. There's a cost to become a trainer for that. I think another area that we need to lean into as mental health providers is falls prevention. Folks living with mental health conditions are much higher risk for falls. In fact, I did a little study of Tai Chi in the state psychiatric hospital in about older adults, and we did find that people had a slight improvement in their number of falls as a result of participating, and they really, really loved the Tai Chi as well. So looking at other options, the CDC has some great tools about identifying programs and implementing them, but we really should be thinking about falls. You can also start at your local Y senior center or area agency on aging about their evidence-based falls programs. And there's, New Jersey has them, and I'm sure every state offers evidence-based falls prevention programming. So that's a great resource. And of course, caregiver support. I think I already mentioned that. So now I want to hear from you. Been talking a lot. What programs, strategies, and frameworks do you use to support people aging with mental health conditions? You all have started to drop in little things, hints. I saw RAP, this combined housing and behavioral health services. What else are you starting to do? Whether it's a program, or if it's a strategy. You all were mentioning, also shared, you were mentioning motivational interviewing as an option, and RAP. Anything else that you offer? Oh, interesting. Teaming up clients as pairs for some tasks. That's very innovative. So kind of almost like a buddy system as partners, which offers moral support and some additional resources. That's very clever. Very clever. Anybody else? What are some programs or strategies that you use for your people that you're serving who are aging with mental health conditions? Also looking, I see someone has put in the chat, looking at sort of the assessment of the situation, what, their functioning. Do people need support such as wheelchairs or canes? Do they need skilled nursing? Right, because there's that, we talked about this last time, there's a lot of pushback about nursing homes don't really want people living with mental health conditions to live there. Or also assisted living, as they're called in New Jersey, which is sort of between, it's not quite long-term care level of service, but the person may need a little bit more. And there's that sort of intermediate level of care in aging services where there is probably a nurse there all the time, and it's 24-hour staff, but people can come and go as they like, and they get meals and maybe some medical care. And also looking at assessing, do they need Meals on Wheels? That's a wonderful resource that's available in most communities. And I'm not sure what IHHS services are, but I'm assuming it might be kind of a wraparound or additional support services. Using smart recovery strategy. Night. Oh, in-home support services. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. So it sounds like you all are using sort of a mix of mental health strategies and some of the strategies used in aging, like traditional aging services, to really meet people where they're at. And I think that, probably when we do case management or when we engage with people, we're really meeting them where they're at with whatever needs they bring to us. I want to give you an example from my own practice. It's been slightly adapted to remove any identifying information. And I'm not going to tell you, I was not in the state of New Jersey when I met this person and worked with them. But this is John 62, and lives with his partner of 20 years. He's lived with schizophrenia for many years and often forgets to take his medications. He has hypertension and diabetes, and he gets very angry when you ask him about taking his medications. When you visit him, you discover that his house has a pest problems, a lot of bugs crawling everywhere. There's no food in the refrigerator, and his partner relies on him for assistance to dress, use the toilet, and prepare meals. What type of programs do you think would John benefit from? I've listed the ones we went over, but you might think of some other ones that you know about. So what are some programs you think that John might benefit from? And as I said, this was based on sort of a real situation, home visit that I did with someone, an older adult that I had worked with, and got quite the surprise that he was providing such a level of caregiving to his partner. Yes, this intensive in-home support services, Meals on Wheels, absolutely, medication management, and help with creating a shopping list. Thank you. Thank you. And I think you also had a question about which pearls do you use? So if you, I don't know the answer to that question. When I looked at the main Pearls website for the people who developed it, I believe it's the University of Washington that is delivering it now. I only saw one, so I apologize if I missed that. But that's just a consideration, just an idea to be creative. I think there are also some other types of programs that we have to be thinking about as we support older adults. And that includes end-of-life discussions, which are very hard to have. And there's very little research done in this area about end-of-life discussions in people with uh, serious mental health conditions. And it's mostly focused on uh, ability, cognitive capacity and ability to make decisions. But I think we also need to be talking about the psychosocial perspective of it and how hard that can be. I believe we really need to focus on anti-stigma, aging and ageism and, ableism and all of the isms, racism, sexism, to really address those in our own organizations and also in the community. So if you hear somebody saying ageist things or saying things, and we have to sort of step up and be like, hey, did you know that that's actually not true, or that people do live a great life despite having health conditions. People can live really meaningful lives. I also, because I'm interested in positive psychology, I really think we need to be looking at purpose and meaning, because that is really kind of who we are. And as we age, that becomes a bigger thing that we consider. Physical activity, having done some research in that area, I think that there's so much evidence that movement supports our brain health. And we need to be asking people about how much exercise they're getting or how much they're sitting, and encouraging them to connect with programs that support them in a way that they can move. And lastly, multidimensional wellness. So next week, we're going to be talking more about the strengths and challenges of people with mental health conditions who are aging. And I wanted to lean into this idea of multidimensional wellness because I think it's a great sort of landing place for us to go with more services. Thank you. Someone has listed the Pearl's website. Really appreciate that. Wow. And then end of life discussions. Yeah. Assisted suicide or yeah, end of life. And we have to talk about these end of life choices. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the summary for today is healthy aging is really taking those actions for health and resilience. Shared decision making is a strategy that can really help to empower our clients. Psych rehab programs include skills training, self-management, integrated programs, and peer services. And aging programs may offer benefits also for people with mental health conditions. Please drop in any questions you may have. As promised, lots of resources. I wanted to make sure that you know about the services. I also want to highlight the E4 Center. They're doing some interesting work, and Dr. Bartels is part of that, who's done some health research for people with older adults with mental health conditions. And I want to, got some references because, that's how I am. I'm going to turn it over to Kati.
Thank you, Dr. Zechner. As mentioned earlier, we are SAMHSA funded, and as part of receiving this funding, we are required to evaluate all of our programs. So if you could please take a moment to scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can click directly on the link that I shared in the chat that will take you to the short evaluation survey. Next slide, please. Oh, and then we also have our upcoming session, Approaches to Expand Strengths and Support Challenges as People Age with Serious Mental Health Conditions. And we also want to announce that we also have a learning collaborative that is beginning in April. It will be April 10, 17, 24, and May 1st on psychiatric rehabilitation and aging, building new programs. Next slide, please. And we also would like to invite you to check out our podcast channel, Toward Wellness and Recovery. And we have a podcast, Flourishing at Work, a helping plan for professionals. And you can find this podcast either on Spotify, Apple Music, or Podbean. And if you've missed any of our previous webinars, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen. It'll take you to our products catalog, and you will find our past webinars and products posted there. As a reminder, we will email everyone a certificate of completion within 7 days of this webinar broadcast. And again, we invite you to follow us on all of our social media channels using the handles that you see on your screen. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Zechner for another wonderful webinar and presentation, and everyone who have participated and provided such a wealth of feedback in the chat. And everyone has been so interactive. We really appreciate your participation, and we hope to see you next week at our upcoming webinar. Do you have any words for our participants?
I just want to say thank you to everyone. I love doing these webinars because I love talking to the people who are doing this work. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for your engagement and your participation. It's really been interesting. And I hope that you can join us next week and think about if you or someone from your organization might want to do more work in this area to join our learning collaborative. It's going to be myself, and it's going to be a group from New York City who do psychiatric rehabilitation with older adults. I visited the program. It's amazing. We've got some mental health providers and a peer provider who provides services to older adults there. So I really encourage you, if you're interested, or if you have someone in your program that you think might be interested in thinking about how to implement psychiatric rehab services or programs or new programs for older adults at your setting. I really encourage you to check it out because it's going to be a smaller, intimate, it's going to be a meeting format so that you'll be unmuted. You can talk with us. It's going to be very interactive and encouraging you to think about the kinds of programs you'd like to add into your organization. So thank you very much. Again, I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. And if you missed any of these, you can check out our website. And as Kati said, our slides will be posted and the recordings will be posted.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.